Before there was the Ankh, before the pharaohs wrapped their names in royal ovals, there was a single loop, a perfect circle known as the Shen. To the ancient Egyptians, this was no simple shape. It was eternity itself. An unbroken line with no beginning, no end, and the divine power that held the cosmos together. It marked kingship, protected the soul, formed the very blueprint from which the Ankh, the symbol of life, would later emerge from. And at the center of it stood the sun god, the great force the Egyptians believed renewed creation every day. So why did the gods, the kings, and the entire pantheon place such cosmic importance on a single circle? Let's unravel the eternal mystery of the Shen. Welcome, guys. This is, I even lost count, 14, I think. Number 14, but it is that part 2 I was talking about. So I wanted to break this up into 3 sections, and then each section you could watch on its own. But if you put them together, I'm hoping at the end, again, so far we have these 2 pieces that kind of work together. But at the end, all 3 of these should mesh together and make a pretty cool picture of something that I had a lot of fun digging into. You know, everyone's sidebar. I know we're already like pretty early in to have a sidebar. I feel like it's really fun to go down this Egypt esoteric, like the pyramids and like extraterrestrial type. I don't want to do that on these. I want to bring it kind of down, right? If I want to do something like that, I'll leave it for like this Sunday fun episode. But this one, I just had a lot of fun diving into this symbol, the Shen, because a lot of it I had no idea about, like none. It was a breath of just information. I'm just sitting here for 3-4 hours going, oh, no way. So I'm glad that you're here. Let's get into it. As I say that, the first note I have is the Egypt esoteric tradition. Might as well. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything. So from what I found in this esoteric type idea is that it's this unbroken circle that represents the first time, so Zep Tepi. That moment of creation where, everything bursts from this primordial chaos, which is super common, and really, really cool to kind of have that as a piece to maybe work with later. But yeah, it was like this original order of the universe, and then they brought it down into the symbol, at least in this, esoteric tradition. But, we were talking about initiation earlier, like the maybe the esoteric initiation of the labyrinth ties into this symbol, and then the shape of the Shen that might be underneath the labyrinth, this huge 40-meter, Shen symbol. And I really liked kind of going there, but something I found that was the point that we're going to start with was the center point, which was the sun god, right? It is light, this being, this force that guides the soul from one life to the next. Just regardless of like, oh, it's a funky, esoteric tradition. Some of the things were like cosmic containment, right? It's the boundary that separates chaos from order, the renewal, right? The sun's eternal rebirth at dawn, right? Night to day, that kind of a deal. Divine sovereignty was a big deal, right? The authority given to the gods that then passed down to the pharaohs to preserve, order. And then, the cycle of spiritual return, right? This soul's journey of death and rebirth. And I figured we could walk through this symbol, walk through some of the stories, and then show you guys what Shen is all about. Since the sun god is this centerpiece that we were talking about, I figured I would try to dig for some good resources on that. One of them was pretty cool. It's this pretty short article by the American Research Center in Egypt. It looks like it's by Faiza Haikal. It just had a very good, like, oh, how do you want to get into it? And I'm like, oh, that story is a good intro, and it's the, creation of Ra, the sun god of Egypt. But I'll just kind of read it and then kind of give you this, like, 3-paragraph, like, whoa, like, that's what we're starting with. So, before creation, according to Egyptian mythology, only darkness embraced this primeval ocean out of which life would eventually come. And so, when the breath of life was strong and ready, the entity called Atum decided it was time for creation to begin. From that decision, an island emerged from the water to support this divinity, who manifested itself in the form of Ra, the sun god. And so on this primeval hill, Ra created out of himself, which I think is kind of cool, this emanation theory that we're finding in some of the ancient Near East traditions. He created out of himself the first gods, right? Which I think was funny. It was the first gods were Shu, which is dryness and air, and his partner. It looks like Tefnut, which is humidity. Man, just nothing but hot, dry air. Nice. And so, but they would engender other gods from themselves to complete the cosmos. So it's like Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess, or Nut. In turn, the two of these birthed something interesting I found was the principles of life. So Osiris is always like, Osiris this and Osiris, and what a funky story. But he's supposed to be the perfect being who eventually would rule over the rest of the world. And so when Ra was busy creating, and naming the elements, humankind happened out of his tears, out of his eyes, which is, it's a very common motif as well. But, just the idea of blending something from the gods that's physical from them down into our physical area and try to work with something. But Osiris was a kind and wise ruler, and this is also super, like, what? I didn't know they had this, who taught humans agriculture and civilization. So with his sister and wife, Isis, who helped her husband with creativity and magic, they formed this perfect couple. But then their brother Seth, he was strong, unruly. He was the complete opposite of Osiris. And so he envied Osiris so much that he killed him, so then he could inherit his throne and rule Egypt the way he wanted to. And, Seth's sister partners with, I'm going to butcher that, Nephthys? That's so wrong. I don't know exactly, I didn't do much on them, but they could not stop this murder. It said, killing Osiris turned out not to be such a bad idea, though, because he was resurrected through the magic of his wife, long enough to impregnate her with the son Horus. Horus is going to be another figure in this Shen idea that we're going to see pop up, who would later avenge his father and recapture the throne of Egypt. Then Osiris departed to the other world to rule over the deceased, thus ensuring resurrection and the cycle of life. Which I think is kind of an interesting motif that, like, it might have been a bad thing, like a murder or like, this adversarial person, but also now we get, the potential for resurrection and this, the understanding and cycle of life. So it actually ended up being a good thing, right? I don't know much about Seth in this one, but, that's kind of what I was pulling from it. But while Ra was aging and he said was fine-tuning his creations, humanity rebelled against him. The god, Ra, decided on extermination, asking his tear-giving eye again for help. Nice. To fulfill her task, the eye transformed herself into a fierce lioness and began slaughtering humanity. Delighted in her feeding, and when Ra saw the carnage, he felt sorry for the beloved children, who like tears came out of his eye. He stopped the massacre, but refused to live more among humans. Now, this seems I might be pulling something from nothing, but tell me that doesn't sound like the flood. Like, as soon as I read that, and it's just nothing but highlighted notes, I go, oh my God, it's just like the flood. Like, it just hit me like, boom, a freight train. Because, you have reference to tears, water. Granted, it is, I think it's, I don't even want to guess wrong, but technically it's a fierce lioness that begins slaughtering everybody. But, there was some very unique imagery, and the connection to exterminating humanity and then changing its mind is very Genesis to me. And so throughout this whole thing, right, Ra eventually leaves the earth, right? And so that's the night and the day, right? Light from dark, which I think is interesting too, very Genesis. Illuminating the dead, destroying the enemies of creation, and regenerating himself in union with Osiris, who is the god of resurrection. And, some of these were really cool. Sekhmet. Thank you. That's who becomes his eye. Sekhmet. And so there's a really cool connection to the idea that Ra becomes physical, comes down to humanity, rules alongside the first pharaoh of Egypt, right? He's, the god of the sun god, of course, of order, of kings, and of the sky. And so all life comes from Ra. And so I found this cool little side note where it's like the Egyptians sometimes called themselves like the cattle of Ra. And, in this myth of the celestial cow, it has this recounting of how humankind plotted against Ra and how, he sent Sekhmet his eye to punish them. But the common thing that I got from this was at the beginning of time, which seems common in all of these, religious studies or textual studies that we're going to go through, is like everyone agrees that at the beginning of time, it was just chaos. It was just whatever, and it was not good. So then something had to come into cosmic order and then put it all together. And so the primordial waters, especially, is very cool. So anyway, I'll skip all the other little things I have here, but the main part is that Atum, who created everything in human form out of this chaos, kind of made this order. Ra began to rule over the earth, where humans and then the divine like coexisted, ruled together. And it reminds me of Garden of Eden. I was like, Garden of Eden vibes? Like immediately. So Genesis is going to be, at least for me, pretty common to be an old, because I grew up in that. So like Genesis is easy to go to, and these are all new to me. And also, no offense, way more entertaining. Like way more fun to go through. And so these, remember the two siblings, the principles of life, right? It is the two universal principles of humans. So life and justice. These two balancing, ironically, the balancing of scales. But Ra was believed to have created all forms of life. So after this chaotic primordial thing, and Atum does his organizational structure, Ra then kind of does the, I keep doing this because it does feel like clay, right? Like the molding of all life. And he does it, which I think is interesting, by calling them into existence by uttering their secret names. And that's the first, one that I kind of was like, that's a good introduction. And then I found another one, another myth, another story, where Ra ruled on Earth as a pharaoh until he became very, very old. I don't know how old that was, but who knows? If it's Sumerian old, like the King's List, then we might have a problem. Or he might have been something else entirely. But at this time, the people, they lost respect for him. They didn't obey his laws anymore. And so he decided, hey, they should be punished. That's right, Genesis vibes. You should be getting that one. And so after he sent Sekhmet to, teach them a lesson, she kind of went too crazy. And so then it's like, oh, we're going to have to stop her. So after that, Ra decided it was time for him to leave the world behind. And he gave it to Horus, who took place as king. And his job was to then travel across the sky to create night and day. So something when I was looking into it too, which is that might be a side note. We might come back to that one. And so we're gonna leave this. There's another section. We'll go into it. Why not? Bleep it. Yeah. There was a connection with Aten, which I think was cool because it's not the sun, right? So in this case, Ra would be the sun itself, the energy from the sun, life, a deeper meaning to what it represents. This was interesting where Aten was the disk of the sun, right? And was considered an aspect of the sun god Ra. So not Ra himself, but an aspect of him. And so everyone knows Akhenaten, who was like I knew about him because I thought he was the monotheistic pharaoh that tried to go back. But if he's going back to something like these stories where, we have to go to the beginning, we're losing ourselves in a way, then you would kind of erase all the nonsense in between and try to get back to baseline. Maybe I've read a lot of things about it being political, mostly political, but during his reign, Aten was elevated to the status of this supreme, and then eventually the only god, and then that was Atenism. And so, as I dug deeper, I was like, that's interesting in itself, because also it reminds me of Exodus, where, God gives this, like, messenger of himself, who is him but not him, to lead the people. And this kind of feels like that. And so, the term itself referred to the physical disk of the sun, but not the sun. So Ra, being the sun, resided within it, right? Take that how you will. Oh my gosh, it's a craft. He's the sun, right? Maybe. That's a fun Sunday episode. Hang on tight. But something I pulled from this story is that when Akhenaten was trying to move this Atenism and this new wave, he as pharaoh was the sole intermediary between Aten and humanity, between essentially God and the people. And so I think, I'll speculate a bit. Unlike other stories that I hear about, Egypt and, deities themselves, the Aten was more of something that was not duplicated or depicted in human form. So, like his symbol, and I'll put it over here, it has like the sun and then the rays coming out, and you see the disk in the middle. And so maybe it was political, maybe it was trying to return to the first time, Zep Tepi, and this felt like a more accurate representation in this case. Probably because it wasn't depicted as something that was like understandable by human beings, which I thought was interesting because that also is super clear in, the pharaohs being this divine, physical form of the god, the appointed divinity to rule. So then after that, the next section is moving into, so if those are the gods that are associated with it, what is it? What does it mean? We already kind of went through what it means, but the roots of Shen, this symbol, it's associated with the god Amun, right? This patron deity of Thebes. It thinks to be created during the New Kingdom. So it was often depicted in like conjunction with Amun's image, like his symbol of power and authority. And so, again, the pharaohs were believed to be these divine rulers. And then with Amun's power residing within them, using the symbol was the visual representation of this divine authority, which gives that connection to, oh, I have a direct line to the gods themselves, and you don't. And so you go, oh, interesting. Because over at... Aw, man, it cut it off. That's alright. That's pretty much the key point to bring out from that. But there is a unique connection to, okay, so now we have two pieces. Where do they mesh together? We have the story of Ra, and then we have the Shen symbol, which is Amun. And I go, do they ever merge? They do. And that's AMUN-RA. And this god becomes the most powerful god in ancient Egypt. A supreme deity, if you will. And so the date that I got was 2040 BCE, where they had their fusion. And so in combining these two deities together, you essentially get the divinity of the visual sun. You see it, you know it, like, oh, life comes from this. But then you also get these invisible forces of creation and air, which is Amun. And so together they embody this concept of a supreme, all-encompassing God that then is just like, oh, that's the one, dude. Because I would love to go visit this, by the way. But the temple at Karnak. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I'm like, man, I need to go to Egypt real bad. And so, I know it's a side note, but this precinct of AMUN-RA Karnak, it was interesting because the things I found with Thebes, it was like it wasn't big until the 11th dynasty. And so Herodotus and Strabo give the exact location of Thebes in their notes. And I remember going through them and going, Thebes is in there, I think, right? How long it is up the Nile, how you must travel to reach it. And immediately I went, okay, if they're writing about this labyrinth, right, and we're finding it, we've scanned it, we kind of have it's under there, how do we get there? They also, they didn't lie. And remember earlier in the episode last time I said, oh, they have a tendency to like exaggerate. And I go, sometimes. If anything, they were more accurate. Because we didn't get to Thebes until like, it said the 16th centuries, 15th, 16th century down in Lower Egypt. And they still got it wrong. And they put it like right next to Memphis. And so that's an interesting, side road we won't go down. But, the idea is that, all right, Herodotus and Strabo wrote where it is, exactly how long it is, how you travel to get there. And so maybe this place was so impactful, so magical to them, that they were like, we have to be accurate. This stuff is just insane. And I'm like, I really wonder what's underneath the ground over there in Hawara. Because it must have been so amazing. Who knows? Maybe we'll see. Maybe in our lifetime we'll get there. But again, you've probably seen the Shen symbol that I've been posting up here during the video, but it's this oval or circle with this horizontal line at the bottom. And so it's this representation of, this unbreakable loop. So that signifies, infinity, eternity, and also represents this powerful symbol of protection. And so it gets connected to Ra when they merge, this AMUN-RA, which represents now all creation, the cyclical nature of the universe, and then makes Shen this perfect representation of that all-encompassing and eternal power. And so I needed to dig deeper. I had to keep going, right? Like, already this is enough to be like, that Shin, here you go. And it was at 20-something minutes in. That's all you need to know. But I want to give you guys more, give you as much as I went digging for it. Because there were some really interesting, things about Shen being the symbol of, like, what is this cycle? Like, what does Shen mean to the pharaoh? Or, like, in the afterlife, like, what is it about? And I almost said and so again. I've been catching myself. I have been. It's almost like a loop, right? An endless loop of, death, journey, and rebirth that was, like, central to, like, Egyptian beliefs. And so it reflected this natural order, this world cycle of life, death, and renewal. And then if you were righteous enough, the promise of an afterlife rather than an immediate, annihilationism, essentially, where your soul doesn't exist anymore. And as time goes on, it makes this daily practice of, like, this cycle, this all-encompassing divine power that you have to, remember. And it's kind of a good thing to have too, because you're like, it does seem kind of like a restrictive model, in my opinion. Kind of feels like the classic, like, do good things and you get a good afterlife. But they wanted to reunite with Osiris in the afterlife, and so it became this, like, model for the potential for human resurrection. And I really, really tried to go into, there's a lot of different interpretations, so maybe I have to just go there one of these days. But by achieving this eternity, right, you get this, field of reeds, or you get this annihilationism, which is you don't exist ever and you never will. But it was all achieved through, like, a morally upright life, to ensure that, your soul itself was judged favorably by Osiris. And where this gets tied into the pharaohs is it's used to signify that the king or god was protected by the heavens. And then, again, that goes with protection, and then it goes with eternity. So this eternal cycle of life is kind of common. And these deities would often hold, or they would carry the Shen. And again, frequently shown with a sun disk on the inside, emphasizing its connection to the eternal cycle of the sun, and by extension, this eternal life. And so, did it again. I had to ask these questions to get a little bit deeper with the pharaohs, because I thought it was like, are they talking about an eternal resurrection of, like, becoming something new, like, into this material? No. But they did have this, the pharaohs themselves, at least in the Old Kingdom, had this potential for immortality because of their connection to the gods themselves. So, since they were seen as these gods on earth, their souls were worthy enough to potentially join the gods after death. And things that were built the way they were, like the pyramids, tombs, even the rituals they did at the funeral, it all was designed to try to ensure that they were worthy enough, or that their resurrection and transformation would be complete, and they would be amongst the gods as an immortal being. And then on Sunday, I found this and thought it would be fun to go to in, like, a Sunday speculation, were the pyramids. And I looked this up 3 times to make sure I wasn't, like, getting it wrong. The pyramids were considered resurrection machines, meant to aid the pharaoh's transformation into an immortal star. And I go, holy shit, is that true? Oh, I said a bad word. Because remember, initially in the Old Kingdom, this is only given to the pharaohs. They're the only ones who are, I guess unique in this case, to receive this gift of divine immortality. And in this gift, they have the potential to become a transfigured spirit that was judged by the gods. And again, Osiris is key in that one. And so the symbol that we get for that, which has the same it kind of develops out of the geometry of Shen, is the Ankh, which is the representation of life and resurrection. And so it emerges from the Shen's geometry, and then, how do I put this? Like it like manifested life becomes the Ankh, right? Like that's life manifested. But like the Shen is just like, it's like life sustaining. It sustains life. It creates life. It is life. And so both these together, it gives you this like eternal frame of eventually this soul's journey and judgment. So I'm not going to go into any of the other notes that I have here about all the different ritualistic practices or any of those things, but I do want to get back to this Ankh, this key of life symbol, which I guess isn't just life, it's like the promise of immortality. Like that's what this symbol represents later. But like this regenerative, like beginning and continuation of life. Yeah, that sounds right. And the whole idea and the whole goal that I thought was key in this, and bringing it back to like, why would you build this giant labyrinth underneath, for no reason, just to like look cool, right? That doesn't make any sense. But if your goal is, well, essentially to go from a mortal to a regular being with the potential to be an immortal being, yeah, you probably build that. And you probably learn as much as possible. And, I think it's called Zhao, I think is what it is. Yeah, the Zhao. It's like, that's the spirit that it is, like a transformed spirit. Which was this unique thing that could only exist in the divine realm, which is exactly where the gods reside. And, the pharaohs, again, were these divine rulers. But they would ascend to heaven after death to join these other gods. And so, being judged by Osiris, you would eventually make it back to the sun god Ra. So it does have this cyclical nature, even in my notes, of like going around to get to the research, and then boom, the sun god is still in that key component category for this. And so they were believed to journey to the sky after death, if worthy enough, become one with the gods, flying to heaven to unite with their son, father. Now, if you want to get Sunday fun with that, interesting. And this new existence was just a continuation of life, but you were in a better form. You were perfected in this case, where the bodies that they did all this stuff would be, the ritual practices and funerary rites and all these things. It would take on this divine substance and maybe be like, gold, right? Like a flesh of gold. So like gold is predominant everywhere. And yeah, I really had a lot of fun with trying to look this up and trying to give a, part two. If I wanted to, really, I might be able to. I might be able to combine it with, if you made it this far, thank you very much. I do appreciate you guys for doing this and listening to me. And again, I love all those comments. Like, I'm not trying to do this for any type of, vanity or whatever. I hope you guys are having just as much fun trying to unravel these, like, mysteries as I am. Because if it does go back to this, Zep-Tepi first time, then it would also represent this perfect loop, right? This like time loop of trying to get back to the beginning of time where things were good and the gods walked amongst us, and then we kind of did this and we kind of got in trouble, and then, right, that is a very common theme too, and then God had to like show us punishment. Anyway, the whole idea is, I guess that is the whole idea, is that they're not so far away from you and I, right? These beliefs are not that far away from, you can find these, I am. I found a lot of these connection points, like boom, boom, boom. I can point to that, point to this. The one that did throw me for a loop was, of course, and all of the esoteric type ideas of like to do this, and combining it with like this symbol, and this symbol represents this, spiritual enlightenment or gift that you can't touch, but you could potentially earn by being, in this, I guess, moral in this case. And I think the stories also play into it, where just like we read something that would be scripture, it's like, wow, that hit me hard. It's like these hit them hard too. And again, I said that the old kingdom had just the pharaohs, but then also that later in the new kingdom gets extended to everybody, right? It just becomes judgment in this case. And again, this is super early. This is like way before anything else. So I also get some of these feelings of this, it's a precursor almost to what develops later on in the Near East, right? Like all these, places especially during the Bronze Age, they're trading like crazy. And, they're probably sharing these. They're probably getting something of value from them that they could borrow or use and have themselves. And so getting to the end of like something to conclude with is whether it's, super esoteric and like, the pyramid legitimately like shoots your soul out, and that's why it's so important, all the way to, building something from, an idea or some type of higher goal of attaining something beyond yourself, right? Those are all in there. And I just had a super fun time going through them. And I hope you guys did too. I really didn't have a conclusion for this. I just wanted to, I guess that's how we'll end it. But yeah, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you. And we'll catch you next time.